Welcome to the All In Podcast, the show that explores how the top real estate entrepreneurs have gone all in on their businesses. I'm your host, David Morse, with my co-host, Joe Quattrucci, and I invite you to come along with us as we explore the stories of the most elite professionals in the game today to learn how they went all in and how you and I can do the same. So I just have to ask, are you all in? All right, welcome back to the All In Podcast. We have a wonderful show for you today. I have with us Seth Levin, the co-founder of the Levin Kong real estate team out of Manhattan, New York City. Seth, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me, guys. Really honored to have been invited to share with you today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome.
Seth, thanks for being here with us today. Start by telling the listeners, how long have you been in real estate and what is your business? Give us kind of an overview of what your real estate business looks like in New York City.
Okay, great. So got into real estate in the early 2000s. So, close to 20 years in the business here in New York City. Did a little bit of real estate development and investment prior to actually becoming a real estate agent in 2002. Started with another company, was there until about 2016, company of 5,000 people where I was ranked in the top 20 nationwide. Since coming over to Keller Williams, we've been Sales Team of the Year locally 2016, 17, and 18, and consistently ranked in the top 1% of real estate agents in the country. We're primarily focused in Manhattan, but we have a business that also involves Brooklyn, parts of Queens, and a little bit of Long Island at this point as well.
Love it. And so one of the reasons I'm excited to talk to you today, Seth, is New York City is just such a different animal than the rest of the country. I mean, I don't think there's anyone would argue with the fact that New York City is one of a kind. And so the way that you've built a massive real estate business in that city is fascinating to me. And you've centered your business on luxury. Take us through the journey of how you got into luxury real estate and why you decided to go all in with luxury.
Well, that's a great question. So when I started in real estate in the early 2000s, I was mentioning to you earlier that I sort of was taking whatever business I could get. It was all through networking. It was all through, going to a party, going out with friends and meeting a friend of a friend. And I was mostly working with buyers. And if the buyer had a $300,000 budget, I was a $300,000 agent. If the buyer had a $2.5 million budget, I was a $2.5 million agent. It wasn't until about 2007 where I actually really started focusing on a luxury business because at that point I had enough of the luxury resume that I was able to lead with that resume. And then I always say this when I actually teach a class, how to break into luxury. It's not about, having a lot of conversations with a million people, which a lot of real estate is. It's about developing really deep relationships with a few people. I can point to about 75% of my luxury-based business can go back to the root of about 3 different people that through them, the branches of their network, the interconnectivity of their network with other people within a building, let's say through them I got into a building and then I did 10 sales in that building, I could trace it all back literally to 3 people. And I think that that's probably true for most people in luxury. They can trace it back to a handful of people or maybe an organization or 2 that they're associated with.
I love that, Seth. Already you're giving us just like multiple bullet points and multiple little bits of gold here already. I've already heard you say 2 things that I want to touch on. Number 1 is you don't have to have an extensive luxury business to get into luxury. You start by picking them up when you can, and over time, as you earn those different deals, then eventually you build yourself a luxury portfolio where you can start to lead with the fact that you have closed several luxury listings. But the only way to get that experience is to first have the first one and then the second one. Exactly. And then the second point you made that I think is super important, and I'm, I do this all the time. I train agents, start by having a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and what you're saying at a certain point, at a certain level, a lot of your successes come down to really focusing in and honing on just three people really that have grown into this enormous network of referral business and repeat business.
Exactly. So for instance, today, just today, I was talking to, I wasn't having 100 phone calls. Early in my career, maybe I would want to have 100 phone calls. Besides talking to you guys today, I talked to three people, but three people at a very high level. One of them is a former client of mine, well, present client of mine, but formerly bought 3 luxury apartments through me. And we're talking about how to maximize his real estate assets. And we're sort of playing the game of Monopoly, trying to figure out where to position his investments, what to sell, what to hold in order to sort of take advantage of this current climate. And I can get into that, further detail, what types of properties and what we're looking at. Then I had another conversation today with a former client of mine. They own 2 properties in the same building that are next to each other, 1 bedroom and a 2 bedroom. And we had originally talked about selling them as a combination, but because of what's going on in the market, because of the COVID situation here in New York, we're actually now thinking about selling them, selling the 2 bedroom first, because right now there's an opportunity in our market where there's low inventory in that particular segment of the city, that property class. And then we're going to look to sell the 1 bedroom later. So we're doing a lot of, my conversations are very strategic. The third conversation, ironically, or actually it goes back to what I was saying about one person getting you in and then talking to other people within the building, was another person I met in that building. And he's got about a $4 million property. We've been talking prior to COVID about selling that and him upgrading to about a $6 million property. Now, because he's got a lot of liquidity, he doesn't need to sell that $4 million. So we're talking about him buying the $6 million, or maybe even going up to something that was $8 million to see if we can get it for about $6 million. And then he wants to buy maybe a couple $2 million investment properties because the market is so soft. So it's about allocating resources more than looking at a buy or sell situation.
I'm smiling here, Seth, and I apologize. We're sitting here. Part of our studio is just falling apart, so it shouldn't affect the recording quality or anything like that. But this is part of the growing game of of podcasting, I guess, is getting the studio right. So anyway, okay. One thing that I think is really important for the listeners to pick up on: 75% of business trace back to 3 people. Right? We're talking about that. So there's this model, this idea in your real estate business that you have core advocates, right? Mm-hmm. Who are those core advocates? And I think that's really what we're talking about here, is discerning who your core advocates are. And that can change throughout the life cycle of your business as well. And to pick up on that. So is there anything in, Seth, in your kind of the cadence of your business where you determine like who those people are, who your core advocates are? Have you found that those change, or has that been consistent in your business?
Well, I can trace it back to 3 people, but perhaps the original person is no longer the core advocate. It's somebody that they've introduced me to. So it's about people that have a ton of connectivity themselves, have huge databases. Because if I have a 3,000 person database, but 3 of my core advocates have 20,000 person high net worth databases, all of a sudden they amplify my ability to touch many people. And they're also the types of people, you're looking for the types of people that will actually go out of their way to recommend you, not just when they're asked. So for me, it was about authenticity. And I think especially in luxury real estate, there's very high BS detectors. So you can't buy your way in. Going out to dinner with a group of people and putting your credit card down is not going to get you all the business. It's being the person that they trust. It's being the person they like. And it's being the person that they actually trust that they can introduce to their friends. And you're going to make them look really good. So business begets business is my mantra when it comes to real estate. And I've only really gone into luxury groups of, luxury buyers, luxury sellers, high net worth people, where there was something organic, whether it was, we all have a appreciation for art. I do a lot of my networking at art galleries and openings, and I oftentimes sponsor the wine at an opening just to put my business card next to the wine, that kind of stuff. So it really has to be authentic. And, for instance, there was one of my early advocates who's still one of my best friends actually at this point in time. I went to his wedding in India and came back with a $7 million buyer. Went to his brother's wedding in Africa, came back with a $5 million buyer. Went to his brother-in-law's wedding in Dubai, came back with a $5 million buyer. I've been to so many weddings through this guy that I sort of got indoctrinated into this one group of people. And the referrals aren't actually coming from my original friend. There's people that I met. I was recently, right prior to COVID, and actually it might be on hold for the moment, but I was introduced to the manager of one of the biggest Bollywood actresses in the world through somebody maybe 5 degrees from that original source. So it's not necessarily that all the business came from these 3 people. That's a misconception. It's that I planted seeds that eventually grew into many, many relationships off of those original.
Wow.
That's so important to hear. I think that's all just really incredible. Seth, one of the things you mentioned earlier was your ability to add value to these people by having that tough strategic conversation with them, talking about what assets does it make sense to liquidate right now, which ones do we want to hold on to based on the market. How do you approach that very strategic and sometimes very personal conversation with your clients so that you can really serve them as a consultant versus just a real estate agent, quote unquote?
So, of course, we work with doctors and lawyers, and we work with people in all types of businesses. But I would say at least 80% of my clientele are somewhat in finance, whether it's private equity, hedge fund, bond traders, whatever it is. So I focused my partner and I, David Kong and I, we focus our business on being research-based and data-driven. Our favorite metric to look at is something called market pulse. Most agents are not looking at market pulse, and most people don't know what that is. It's actually the percent of the current supply that's in contract. So the percent of the current supply that's pending for a particular market segment. So end of 2019, I was out to dinner with a client of mine who was the head of risk for a big financial company. And she was still in the same 1-bedroom co-op in Chelsea that I sold her in 2007. We were out to dinner and she was married and she let me know that she was pregnant. And I congratulated her. And one of my first thoughts was that 1 bedroom is probably not going to be enough apartment for you. So she said, you know what, though? It's a terrible time to sell. So I think we're going to stay here for a while. And I said, her name is Liz. I said, Liz, can I come over on Wednesday night and show you some things and we can get a little deeper into that conversation? So she was in a 1-bedroom co-op, prime Chelsea neighborhood. 76% of available inventory was in contract. That's as high as any market segment in New York City. For instance, at that same time, 2-bedroom condos in the financial district, only 9% were in contract. So we talked and she said, I'd love to buy a 3-bedroom condo. 3-bedroom condo in Manhattan, she wound up buying in Brooklyn, but in Manhattan at the time was 22% was in contract. So she had something that had a market score of 76, and she was looking to buy something that had a market score of 22. When I put it in those terms, she saw that she had something that was sellable, and she was looking to buy something that was very vulnerable. We wound up putting her place on the market for 1.2, and we received multiple offers and got the asking price 1.2 within about 2 weeks on the market. She wound up getting an apartment that was originally asking $4 million in Brooklyn for 2.75. It was a lot of good negotiating, but it was also waiting for the developer to keep lowering the price, and we pounced when it was most vulnerable. It got to about 3.3 million, and we negotiated it down to 2.75. So it's, we're looking at, not the entirety of the market. If we look at the entirety of the market, we're painting with really wide brushstrokes. And that's, we'll leave that for the New York Times to say, oh, the real estate market's in shambles. What we want to do is we want to be snipers and pick out specific, useful pieces of data that can help our clients master the market. not just be participants in it.
That's huge. And it doesn't matter what city you're in doing real estate. I mean, what you've done really well, Seth, is you've become, to Joe's point, an expert consultant, an expert at picking out the pieces of information that matter to your buyer or seller. And that's what every agent needs to get really good at. You're not just out there showing property. You really are, in a sense, you're a financial advisor, so to speak, for the real estate in this person's life. So you've become really good at that, and our agents need to do the same.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, one thing that I picked up on that I want to point out to the listeners is, Seth, what you said was you were out to dinner with Liz at the time, and you said, hey, why don't I come over at another time and let's talk about this. So that does two things, right? Number one, you're not trying to sell her anything on the spot in an uncomfortable and scenario with other people sitting around. But number two, now you have a couple of days to prepare yourself to get the relevant market data for her and go over and have a really constructive conversation with relevant statistics and meaningful advice on how to move forward.
Exactly. Well, I always have a few, feathers or, something tucked away in my back pocket, a few market stats that I can use at any cocktail party or any dinner. But even with, my pretty decent mental library of stats, I want a lot of stats to go to somebody's place with. So I don't like to talk on the spot. I do like to prepare. Like I said before, especially in luxury real estate, we're dealing with people that, they really, one misstep. I was actually in a Gary Keller luxury mastermind in 2019, where he said, I actually feel bad for you guys a little bit. You're always skating on a razor's edge. With a regular client, you can misstep, you can misquote information, and they'll forgive you. You can earn your way back. But with a luxury client, one misstep, oftentimes you're done. You don't get a second chance. So be prepared, do your research, do your homework. And again, you're never trying to push somebody to do something. We're trying to listen to them. I teach a negotiation class, and the number one thing in negotiation is listening. Ask questions where you're extracting information. Become a detective so that you can tap into their motivations and you can guide them to a winnable situation. Or if you're negotiating against the other side, so you can extract information to know how far you can push them. But it's about, getting as much information as possible, being a detective, and then being as absolutely prepared as humanly possible for the meetings. This stuff does not come easy. Like, you really, really have to study the market. And, I do a lot of homework before I meet with people, before I get on the phone with somebody. I might be doing 2 hours worth of prep just for one initial conversation with somebody.
So I've got to ask then, Seth. I mean, skating on a razor's edge, even as an experienced agent, does that make you nervous? Or is that part of the thrill of going all in on the luxury market?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely, it's thrilling. There's a little bit of adrenaline, like when you're working with really A-type clients, and, they're not open arms when they get introduced to you, a lot of them. They're waiting for you to earn their trust. And it's that moment where I know that I've connected, where I've proved myself, where I know that they look at me as an equal, as an advisor worth their time. That's really exhilarating for me. And on the other side of the coin, if I don't get chosen as the agent, if I don't, I feel like it's a more of a crash and burn than if I'm going after a $500,000 listing. If I lose a $10 million listing, obviously the highs and lows associated with that are they're extreme. Even after 2 decades doing this.
Thanks for going there. So I think something that our listeners need to pick up on, and you said it a while back, these clients are looking to trust you, right? Like, and you just mentioned again, like getting to that point where you have connected and you've built that trust level. If you want to break into the luxury market, what I'm hearing you say is not that you have to go out and pick up a $750 a month Mercedes payment. You actually have to go back to the fundamentals of this business, which is, how do I relate to people and help them get what they want?
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. That's an incredible point. I always tell people, do not buy your way into the luxury market. You can't afford it. You're a real estate agent. You're not going to be able to keep up with people that I have multiple billionaire clients. One of my billionaire clients, he doesn't expect me to pick up dinner. He doesn't expect that I'm going to drive as nice a car as him. He cares about what I bring to the table as far as information, what I bring as far as strategy, my database. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I had a billionaire client who owned an apartment. This is like a third or fourth home for him. New York City is pretty low on his, he's got Chicago, then Palm Beach, then something in the Caribbean, a ski home in Aspen. This is probably his fifth piece of real estate on his pecking order. Not bad.
Not bad.
So he wanted to put it on the market, but he didn't want a lot of people coming through his apartment. So the luxury market actually mirrors what's going to happen, I think, in real estate in general, with the video, with going after specific buyers, for vetting people before they come in. So he didn't want a lot of people. He actually gave me an opportunity to try to sell it before it came on the market, and that was ideally what would happen for him. A very famous celebrity movie star in a big series of movies. I knew he owned another apartment in the building, so I called his broker and I said, I know that he's in the building. Perhaps he'd like another piece in the building. He was in England at the time. His agent came in. We did a video tour of the property because he wanted to see it. He offered on the spot 3% over our asking price. Then I took my client, and we knew that there was one or two buildings that he was really interested in. There was a unit that just came on the market. I went over there because of my relationship with the other agent. I was able to get him in before it hit the market, did a video. He flew in from Chicago, bought the place like that. So we did two very big sales with only two showings, and both properties were off the market. So that's what a luxury client wants from you. They don't want, I can do the same thing as every agent. I'm going to put it on the MLS. I'm going to put it on Zillow. I'm going to do a broker's open house. They don't want that. They want somebody that is, a tactician, a strategist, and has the connections to the type of agents and buyers that, that they need, to sell their property.
Something super important I'm picking up there is building that professional network, right? So that network of not only buyers and sellers, but what does your network of other professionals look like? You knew the real estate agent. You were able to reach out to them directly and make this deal come to fruition because of your connections and your contacts. So it's super important for us as we're building our databases. That needs to include people in our profession as well. They're not our competition, right? They're people that we're going to help create deals with.
So when I got into real estate in Manhattan in the early 2000s, all the way through 2007, it was a hyper-aggressive seller's market. And I was a young guy in my early 20s. And who was I working with? I was working with buyers. I didn't know sellers. No seller was going to trust me with their listing at that point. So I was running around with these buyers, and my offers were not being heard. So I made a conscious decision. Who are the agents in Chelsea that I need to know? Who are the agents of the Upper East Side that I need to know? And I would go to open houses even when I didn't have buyers, and I would hang out with the agents. 90% of listings usually are held by 5% of the agents. So I wanted to know who those 5% were. I wanted to become friends with them. I wanted to at least have them know my name so that, when people make offers, and I know the broker on the other side, I'm more likely to give them a little bit more information to try to get the deal with them, to find out about their client, to promote that deal over another deal, because I know that they're going to get to the closing table, not because they're my pal, but because we've built up a level of trust and camaraderie, and I know they're not going to screw me over. So, that was a concerted effort that I made at the beginning of my business in real estate, was to meet and befriend the top producers. Then through, joining Keller Williams about 4.5 years ago, I joined the luxury division, and I made a point of, befriending and teaching and training and going to market centers around the country to meet the people that I thought would have the type of clientele that would be synergistic to my type of clientele, so that if my clients are looking to get into Florida, I know who to put them in touch with. Or if I have a $5 million place in a luxury condo in New York, I'm going to reach out to the agents in the top markets around the country to see, because luxury buyers don't only buy because they need to, they buy because they see something that interests them. So we've got to raise the profile of our listings in in luxury circles, because they might say, you know what, I wasn't thinking New York, but that's pretty incredible. I had a conversation recently with a seller, potential seller. She owns a $65 million townhouse on the Upper West Side. The most expensive listing I've ever had is 18 million. The most expensive buy side transaction I've ever had was 11.5 million. I've never done a $65 million transaction, but I was
Me
able to.
either.
Yeah. A lot of people haven't. But I was able to talk to her about the interconnectivity of our luxury division, that, even if somebody in Sun Valley bought a $10 million property there, that doesn't mean they're not a $65 million buyer. It just means that that's the highest price point in that area. So if we talk to those agents there, their clients of $10, $15 million property certainly could be the buyer of a $65 million property in New York. And it's a single family home. And I was explaining to her that in this post-COVID reality, there may be a lot of really high net worth people that were looking at 50, 60, $100 million glass towers now might want, prestigious single family homes. So we're having really interesting conversations right now, to say the least.
That is interesting. Both Joe and I had the opportunity to have coffee and dinner with one of our colleagues, Brady Sandahl, out of Palm Springs recently. And one of the things that he said in the conversation that we had that is pertinent to what we're talking about now is he said the consumer is not looking for exposure. And I think some agents that deal with luxury have this perception that, like, I need to pump this out to as many people as possible. And what he was getting at was, it's not about exposure. You can have a billion eyeballs on a particular listing. It's about the ability to connect that specific property with a person. And his point was, the way that happens is not primarily through the publications that you put it out in. It's not primarily by the logo that accompanies the listing. It is primarily done by the intra-professional relationships that you have. And I thought that was extremely important. And so for every agent, I don't care what price point you play in, it's not about exposure as much as it is about connecting to the buyer, right? That's the end goal there. And I just thought that was brilliant, the way that he put that.
Well, Brady's a pretty brilliant guy, and he's also a very, very good friend of mine. And he is one of the luxury relationships that I'm talking about when, we have something very interesting. He's one of the guys that I'm going to speak to. Another one of my favorite luxury agents here at Keller Williams, she sold a $3.5 million property in the San Francisco Bay Area. She referred her clients to me. We just got them into something here in New York, and they moved into the eye of the storm during the storm. And it was all about that interconnectivity. Prior to coming over to Keller Williams, I had a luxury-based business that was, like I said, 75% traceable to 3 people. That is not the case anymore at Keller Williams, because about 35-40% of my business is broker to broker, agent to agent referrals. So when I take out the agent to agent referral business, it's 75%, but now there's a bigger component. So to be in and to really thrive in luxury real estate, it's not just knowing the luxury agents in your market, which is so important. Like you said before, it was an incredible point. They're not your competition. They're only your competition for a split second when you're competing for a listing. After that, they're your resource. I mean, it's a real quick pivot where, every luxury agent in New York City becomes a resource for me. I mean, they're very infrequently are they competition, because, how many luxury listings are we, I'm not going on listing presentations for luxury listings 10 times a day, but I'm certainly trying to sell luxury real estate multiple times a day, every day, 365 days a year. So we have to, change that perception. Real estate agents are the biggest resource we have. And it's also, one of my negotiation scripts when I'm talking to potential sellers is why we give a full commission, why we don't discount the commission. It's not because I want to line my pockets. It's because the commission is the first piece of marketing that you do, that you put forth to the brokerage community. And we're trying to attract these people. We're trying to befriend and encourage conversations with these people. And one of the ways you do that is offer a full commission.
Yeah, Seth, you've mentioned a couple times now throughout this podcast negotiations. And I understand you've actually even taught several classes and even put together a course around negotiating. Is that right?
Yes.
So you've touched on your philosophy around being a detective and approaching every negotiation from a place of curiosity and gathering as much information as possible. Tell us a little bit more about, because there's several negotiations, right? The initial negotiation to take the listing and talk about commission, and then the negotiation you have, with your client on at different phases throughout the process, and then of course the negotiation with the other agent, right? The actual transaction negotiation. So what guidance do you give to people in these classes that you teach around negotiations and how to really make a deal come together?
Okay. So if you have about an hour and a half, I could really get into it. But I'll start just by saying negotiation happens at first contact. The first time I speak with an agent on the other side, I'm not just making the appointment, or my assistant's not just making the appointment. We're chumming the water for a future negotiation. So we're always thinking that everything is a runway to a future negotiation. So for instance, I have an apartment that's asking 1.2 million, but the same unit 3 floors higher sold for 700,000. I need to find out why that sold for 700,000 and be able to, the first time I speak with an agent on the other side, hey, Joe, as I'm sure you saw, because you're a great agent, always be complimentary. I'm sure you saw that apartment 8A sold for 700,000. That's because the co-op, in New York we have co-ops, the co-op board would only allow the father to sell to the daughter at that was the minimum price that they would allow the transaction to happen. Or, if somebody walks in and my apartment faces a brick wall and it should have been priced at 4.5 million, but because of the brick wall, it's priced at 2.5. The first thing I'm doing after, letting them know that they're going to look at a non-view apartment is when they get in, I'm saying, come over here, look at this view. And they're saying, it's a brick wall. And I'm saying, this is truly a $2 million view. We're taking the negative off the table so it can't be used against us later. We're constantly chumming the water for future negotiation. It's listening more than you speak. My favorite negotiation story is I had a unit on the Upper West Side that was asking about 1.6 million. And we had 2 deals fall through. We were about to lower the price, but a top real estate agent from another company from Corcoran here in New York, she brought her client back for a third showing. And I said to my clients, let's wait until after this to lower the price. They came in and we show our own properties in New York. We don't have lock boxes. There's 2 agents at every showing. And I'm not the kind of agent that's pointing out window treatments. I'm not pointing out the type of washer and dryer. People can see what that is. I'm there to get questions answered, to find out information. So I asked, are you only looking in this neighborhood? They said, no, we're actually only looking in this school district. That's one piece of information. Is your budget up to 1.6? No, it's up to 2 million. Okay, now I know their budget's up to 2 million. So maybe we're not the only game in town. So I know that they wanted to be in the school district. We had about 2.5 months before they could register for school. Co-ops take about 2.5 months to close. So I went back to my computer and I saw we were the only 2-bedroom property in that school district under 2 million. So I called the agent and I said, because of the level of interest on this property, we're going to best and final with a deadline of 5 p.m. on Thursday. We got 3% above ask and we broke a record for the building. The level of competition was the one person. But I was extracting information that we could use later in the negotiation. It's all about information gathering and removing the negatives that could be used against you later.
Communication 101. You think that the position of power sometimes is in the speaking, the talking. But what we know is that the position of power is in listening. It's in asking the right questions. And I think you've brought that up multiple times. being an investigator, asking the right questions is what's going to help you grow a big business. It is what's going to help you win the deal, seal the deal. And if you're listening to this, this is what you need to know. Asking powerful questions is one of the best things that you can do to move your business forward.
That's 100% the case. And also people like to talk, so you're giving them an opportunity to be comfortable, to tell you things. And a lot of what they're going to tell you is going to be very helpful for you. So, really, real estate agents love to speak. And when I teach my negotiation class, I always talk about calling the agent on the other side and then saying interesting after I say the price of the apartment, and just leave a pause, because they always tell me what the problem is with my offer. I'm always going to find out. Then I can go back to my buyer and say, they don't have a problem with the price. They have a problem with the mortgage contingency. So let's be creative there. Or when I present an offer for my client, I don't press send on the offer until the agent picks up. And then I press send and I say, oh, did you get the offer that I sent over? And they always read it back to me. And again, I can hear in their tone of voice what their problem is. I do, when receiving offers or presenting offers, let the agent on the other side tell you the whole story. You're never going to do anything by trying to beat your offer over their head. It's not going to change anything.
Yeah, definitely. Seth, we talk to a lot of successful people on this podcast, and one of the things that Joe and I always find super helpful and fascinating is in the areas where people have failed, right? We know that failing is one of the quickest ways to learn and move forward. Is there a particular time in your career where you have failed and it's taught you something that's moved you forward?
6,000 times. Where do I start? One of the biggest lessons I learned was in putting a team together is taking ownership of every part of the success or failures of the people that you're ultimately training that person. If they make a mistake, it's on you, and you have to take ownership of that with the client. I was in Europe a couple of years ago. One of my favorite clients I've ever had. They've introduced me to 20, 30 people that have bought real estate from me. Their daughter was buying a very low price point apartment, and I trusted somebody on my team to take care of it while I was out of the country. She really dropped the ball. And when I came back, instead of taking ownership of it, I sort of let it sort of linger for a little bit. I lost that relationship, and it's one of the, really is a sore spot in my career. So I think taking ownership of every part of your business, whether you're personally responsible for it or not, is huge. And, that's a huge lesson for me. And, just in general, being super communicative with people. I'd say that any problems that have ever arisen in my business, and it's something that I try to be hyper aware of these days, is because I didn't say what I should have said. I didn't want to ruffle a feather, or I didn't want to, hurt my own ego or whatever it is. But, you really just have to be communicative, every aspect of this business, every, sequential part of the process. And, you never, rarely does something bad happen because you're over communicative.
I really like what you said about, taking ownership in every situation, even if you don't necessarily feel like it might be because of you, right? Extreme ownership and finding your DNA in whatever situation you find yourself in. And what I really love about that is it's actually quite empowering and liberating, because when you own it and when you take ownership of it, you can also take ownership to go change it and to do something about it and to affect the next change, whatever that looks like. And so by owning it, taking that first layer of accountability will allow you then to decide, how do I want to react to this?
Seth, this has all been excellent and super valuable. I want to move us into the last segment of our show. We are all about taking action on this podcast. And so we call this segment 3, 2, 1 action. 3 rapid fire questions for you to finish our episode up. So question number 1, Joe, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Seth, what's one book that you would recommend, either that you're currently reading or that you've read in the past, that has made the biggest influence on your business?
Well, I would say you mentioned Extreme Ownership, which is, I think it's a book that everybody should read, but I'm actually going to say Danny Meyer's Shake Shack, Gramercy Tavern. He's a hugely successful restaurateur. His book, Setting the Table, really changed my mindset surrounding customer service. I read this before CRMs were as prolific as they are now, and knowing everybody's birthday and things of that nature. So it's sort of shown a light on that for me earlier in my career. Maybe this is like 7, 8, 9 years ago that I read this book. And it was about, just remembering people's anniversaries, remembering what kind of restaurant they like, anything that you could pick up, because we want to give, again, Brady Sandell always refers to giving the Ritz-Carlton level of service. And, a lot of that, again, it's listening and it's paying attention so that you can actually serve them the way that they want to be served.
Yeah. So setting the table. We haven't had that one before, I don't think.
No, I love how it's outside of the industry.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
That's fantastic. All right. Question number 2 then. Who is the biggest business influence on your life?
Biggest business influence on my life. Well, I would say recently, since coming over to Keller Williams, it's Gary Keller, because I've always been a bit of a perfectionist, and often I would not put myself in positions where I could lose. I was afraid of failure. Listening to him, reading so much of what he's written, I've really taken to heart the concept of failing forward, because without trying, without pushing, we're sort of always going to be in the same place. And if we want to grow, and if we want to, break barriers and create bigger opportunities for ourselves, we can't be afraid of losing, of failing. So I would say, I've only really known about Gary Keller in a high level way for about 5 years, maybe 6 years. But I'd say that concept and that focus also on, doing your 20%, your one thing, these are things that I was never exposed to for my first decade and a half in real estate, and they are game changers.
Fantastic.
Love that last question on 3, 2, 1 action. Seth, is all about action. So what's one thing that all of our viewers and all of our listeners can go to do today to move the needle in their business? What's one actionable item they could go take action on?
Take action on.
You've got to take action.
Well, real estate is really about conversations. And obviously, everybody should be making phone calls. They should be reaching out to their past clients. They should be, doing whatever they can, speaking in front of their PTA, whatever it is to put themselves in a high-profile position in front of a lot of eyes, in front of a lot of ears. But go there with a lot of research. Like I said before, we're a data-driven team. And, the best thing you can do for your business is to be smarter than the next person. Even if you're not necessarily smarter than the next person, you can study. You can make cheat sheets. I have people on my team or people that I mentor. I tell them, make a cheat sheet with average days on market, average price per square foot, supply, pending contracts, market pulse, year over year, whatever it is, supply, transactions, year over year sales, just have these 6 or 7 things ready to go. At a cocktail party, people want to talk about real estate. So don't just say, oh, I'm in real estate, I sold this, I did that. Have a couple things that you have at the ready that are going to impress them. Show them that you actually know what you're talking about. There's nothing that is stronger than knowledge.
That's fantastic. Seth, this whole conversation has been packed with valuable little nuggets that people are going to be able to take and implement into their business. And I appreciate you joining us. We're thankful to have you as a guest. If people want to learn more about Seth Levin, Levin Kong team, where can they find more about you?
Okay, well, my email is seth@levinkong.com. Our website is levinkongteam.com, and it's actually currently under construction, but we have it live while it's under construction. We're sort of letting people look under the hood while we build it out. And, on Facebook, it's Seth Levin or Levin Kong Team, and on Instagram, we're the Levin Kong Team.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, we hope that you don't just hear what was said today, but you go take action on it and play all in. Have an awesome day.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play all in.